Welcome, Dr. Robin.
Thank you. I will move to the presentation format. And I'm assuming everyone can see that. And thank you, Yvonne, for your composure. Well done. It gets a little tricky. It's the first time I've ever experienced that. So I guess I'm lucky in 2 years, but thank you for your very well done presentation. Now we're going to shift completely to a different area, online learning, mostly in be secondary or higher education. And there are sort of growth opportunities that I've seen based on a lot of my research, our experience, and I'll get into it. All of it's based on this particular book that we just wrote. It's free, so there's no big promotion of it, but it's a good resource. And I will add the link. In fact, I think I can do that now. Oh, I can't. I will add the link to this presentation, so you'll have all the links that I put in here. So I'm referring to this book that we've written. It was actually a collaborative effort for over 40 people. So, and there's also a quick and dirty summary sheet, so that if you're missing things, it's sitting there with that link. And again, I'll post the link to the presentation. So this is me a little bit. I'm a dean and professor, and I've been teaching in high school, community colleges, university, online teaching, and I do a lot of stuff with education and technology. Where I'm located, I thought I'd just briefly show you, because we're from all parts of the world. So if I zoom out here, you'll see, not fast enough, there I am, in North America. It's around the Toronto area, and you can see where I am compared to you. And I'm at Ontario Tech University, small university in Canada. So today, I'm going to give you a few caveats here. My goal is to offer the best suggestions that I know of on terms of teaching online, typically in higher education, but it can also apply to high school. And my background is cognitive science, so how people learn, and I've done a lot of work on research in this area. We've actually been doing online at Ontario Tech and in virtual classrooms for over a decade. So the pandemic wasn't as much of a shift for many of our instructors, but still it was obviously a huge shift for many others. And I'm also basing this on challenges I've made and challenges I've had and mistakes I've made, because we learn from our mistakes, and I've made many going along the path of online learning. There is a caveat here. Each teaching context is different. I imagine when Yvonne, she had to go online, it's very, very different with primary school children than it is for higher education students or middle school students. Class size, subject matter labs, assessments. There's all kinds of things that contribute to a successful online, or at least influence a successful online learning environment. And I will say that I do have a strong bias towards this kind of setting, particularly when people have cameras on through a synchronous format. We've had considerable success in our program, about 95 to 97% graduation rate, compared to the average in North America of the best colleges, which are asynchronous at 55%. So we really promote this in-person connection. So my goal is to provide you with a wealth of evidence-based suggestions and resources to help you thrive in online teaching and learning environments. And so this is today's menu. You can see there's 10 things, and I'll be brief. It's hard to sort of summarize 12 years of work, but I'll do my best. So you may be aware of this, the community of inquiry model. It's one that we follow and involves connection, really. Social connection or presence among the students within the classroom. That turns out to be really a big thing. Cognitive presence, engagement with actually the material that you're teaching, and then teaching presence, your connection with that, with your students, of course, and the way you organize your course and all those good things that teachers do to prepare successful learning environments. Turns out, though, that this social part is really, really important. And so keep that in mind when you students actually come to connect, regardless of grade. And online learning can influence that. They can decrease it, or you can actually increase it if you do it right. And I've mentioned about the synchronous and asynchronous differences and our sort of bias towards synchronous environments. So let's look at some big picture ideas. This is summarized, and by the way, again, I'm going to give you this presentation, but there's a link to each chapter that's sort of supporting these ideas. And when I say chapter, there's 7 to 8 pages, very good for busy teachers. So there are 4 key things. Well, there are many key things, but here's some big picture ideas: organization, the 5 to 10 minute rule, e-culture, and monitoring chat. So with organization, if you've done online learning, I imagine you have, preparation and organization are absolutely critical. It's very difficult to repair interruptions and flow issues, particularly when they're technical online. And so you want to be really well organized. And I'll just show you a bit of an example of what I do. For example, in a lesson, I might have this outline here where I'm got the learning goals, activities, the times, little videos to support, asynchronous or what we would call homework activities. And so I have that for each lesson. And I understand if you're in a high school environment, you might not do that on a daily basis, or although I did, or a shorter version, but it can work really well, and students know your focus, and it served me well. This is probably the most important rule, and one that I am breaking at this point, because there's only so much information that people can take when you're presenting, and particularly with limited attention spans right now, or as they seem to be developing. And so you want to break up your content presentation if you're doing that. Assuming your content also has lots of visuals, you don't want to fill your slide with text that can get people off pretty quickly. You want to break it up with activities. So after about 5 to 10 minutes, you want to shift and do a chat like Yvonne did, or a poll, Mentimeter. There's all really wonderful kinds of polls. You can get students involved. Some people use Kahoot, word clouds. We also use a lot is breakout rooms, small breakout rooms. So we can actually discuss what's going on. And I have students do things like they'll develop something in a Google Doc or Google slide, or they create a mind map, or they work on practice problems as a team, or they work on case studies. But you want to break up what's going on. Otherwise, you'll lose your audience. Everyone knows here that after a certain amount of time, you're going to just start to shift your email or shopping or whatever. So students will do that. So you want to keep shifting around. Setting your culture is absolutely critical in a classroom. So prior to meetings, well, most people probably know how to use Zoom and those kinds of tools, but they may not. And so you want to give them a short video, say, okay, this is what you have to expect. This is how you can do this. Maybe a rule of turning the mics off. Maybe a rule of turning the cameras on in breakout rooms. That's what we do. So we have connection with students. As soon as a student turns the camera off, they step away a bit. They're disconnected a little bit, and so you want to bring that connection back. Having one person monitor the chat, netiquette rules. You can see how important they are today in terms of the kinds of things that you would do in the classroom. You set that culture, and that's really important and taking time to do that. I like to have volunteer chat monitors. That actually is, students love to do it, and they'll monitor the chat. So if something goes in chat and I'm focusing, it's very hard for me to shift back and forth. And they'll say, Dr. Kay or Robin, there's a question here, and that actually grabs the attention of the attention of the audience when we have that back and forth. Okay, so there's some big picture ideas. Now I'm going to focus a little bit on video creation tips. And why would I do that? Well, you probably don't want to lecture. Well, you might want to, but it's probably not going to be effective to just lecture in a classroom. You're going to lose students really, really quickly. So I would say a better approach is to actually create short videos that students listen to and answer questions about before class, and then have the classes more interactive. That would be my approach. But if you're going to create a video, and you're going to have to create them, no longer than 6 minutes in length, and that's with older students, and you chunk them up. We see that data on YouTube watching, and after 2 minutes, your wonderful videos drop down to people just zip out of them. So you want to be careful about that. If you're doing a video, you're going to pretend that you're having a conversation with the students one-on-one. They want to hear that. They don't want to hear you announcing to a whole class. They want to feel like, oh, I'm special. It's me. Avoid perfection, or you won't be able, you might as well stop creating videos, because it's actually hard to learn from perfection. But if you try to create perfect videos, you'll be at forever doing the video over and over again. Eliminate your background music, because that is distracting for students, regardless of how entertaining it might be. In our classrooms, we don't put in music on the background when we're trying to talk to the class. It would be distracting for them. And simple things like meaningful title and visuals, not a lot of text, which I realize I'm breaking my rule here. Clear layout, and then highlight what you're doing, because it's hard to see where you're focusing, where you're actually pointing. And then of course, closed captioning. That's helpful for everyone and necessary for students that have English as the second language. Assessment is pretty important. Lots of debate about that. And it does depend on your context, but some rules, I guess, or guidelines that I follow is you want to be crystal clear. I don't think anybody here would disagree that you would want to be crystal clear, but it's hard to be clear when the students aren't right there and sort of answering questions, like you're going back and forth and presenting your assignment. So test it out with a few people, make sure that it is super, super clear. But you can also then have a checklist or a rubric of things that you want that match the learning goals. That also helps for clarity and students' expectations. And what I do is say, this is the amazing thing that's worked for me, is creating a little video walkthrough of the assignment, so that when students are ready to do it, and sometimes they're ready to do it 2 days before the actual assignments due, a video overview of the assignment, just walking through, this is what I'm looking for. That cut down my emails probably by 95%, because students get anxious, of course, before assignments. And if you have the luxury, and I understand that some of you don't, but if you do have the luxury of some open-ended kinds of assignments, giving students choice, allowing them to be creative, having an authentic assignment, or what we call a non-disposable assignment. And what I mean by that, I mean something where they actually create it and it's useful for the community. So it could be a set of resources. It could be a blog post. It could be students working together on a book of resources, which you can do with Pressbooks pretty nicely. It could be students working together to create a website, because you can do that collaboratively. So, and those things actually help students creating videos for the community. Students get really, really motivated on that kind of assignment. Pre-course ideas. There's a lot of thinking in terms of just jumping into a course. So what would you do? And again, here's a little chapter on those, tell you more detail. So these are some ideas that have worked well for me. A pre-course survey, just to know my students, their backgrounds, and how much knowledge do they have of the subject area that I'm going to teach, because that actually helps. Right now, I don't know my audience here. I'm expecting it's a mix from early years to higher education. And it's important to know your audience so that you can tailor your design of your course to them. A big picture video of the course, a short video, but a big picture. Like, this is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to do it. And this is, here's my plan. That helps students to think, oh, okay, that's what we're going to do. As I talked about the culture, the online etiquette rules, here's what we're expecting. How to succeed in online courses. That's really helpful. And there's a little video there to help, because we think about us and trying to succeed, but students have to succeed online. It's very new for them as well. Student intro videos with Flipgrid, that's fun, particularly for younger grades, but also older grades. So 1-minute video introducing yourself, so people get a little connection, that social presence. And of course, I think most of us understand there's a learning portal or a hub, whether you're using a web page, Canvas, or whatever learning management system you use. Students like a central point of finding all the resources for your courses. Okay, useful technology tools. That's a tricky one because there are so many tools out there, and it's who has the time? It's very difficult to get into these tools. Fortunately, tools now are so much easier to use than they were even 5 to 10 years ago. This is a fantastic guide. The picture I could upgrade. There's a 2021 version for $15 US. I'm not promoting this. I don't know Jennifer Gonzalez, but I do know that this guide is really good for giving you a quick summary. What does this tool do? Here's a video, short video about how to use it. And here's where you go. And I find that's very helpful for me to understand. There's over 400 tools, which is paralyzing, right? I think I use a lot of tools. I certainly don't use 400 tools, but you can find new ones and sort of check them out. Not that new is better, but there's some really, really superb tools that you might not be aware of. Here's an example of an authentic assignment, a non-disposable assignment. These students from University of Massachusetts in Amherst created this website. I'm just going to show you there. It's quite remarkable, actually. A set of tools, and this can be for all grades. But so, for example, I don't know, a Kahoot, well, probably most people are aware of this. Gives you all that kind of key information about, price and all those sorts of things, and what platforms it works on. Gives you an overview video. Talks about the SAMR model, which is a reasonable guide. Not a whole bunch of evidence to support that model, but still really good thinking in terms of how you might use a tool. And then learning activities, which is actually what we really need as instructors, because we have the tool and we say, well, what do we use that for? And so that can be very, very helpful. Now, so that's students created that. So wouldn't that be how motivated would your students be to create something and notice the impact? I did that with my students in terms of math resources, and we were getting 500 visits a day on this wiki, and it was just for my math students. So it's going to be kind of exciting. Your first class, in your first week, I remember mine. I was actually quite terrified. I think that's too strong. I was certainly anxious, and I had been teaching for over 20 years because it was new and I didn't know what was going on and I didn't feel the connection. And students, when I got on there, it was just me, and that's it's pretty isolating. You feel, I don't know if then this metaphor works, but you feel like this comedian up there, or and you can't even see your audience. You don't know what's going on. There's no head nodders. There's that kind of thing, and that's tricky to do. So what do you do in your first week? Well, you take some time to build community, and you might do that throughout. Icebreakers seem like, oh, it's taking time and stuff, but it allows people to get to know each other. And sometimes you form personal learning teams, right? So teams of 3 and 4 students, and that really helps them get through the course and helps them get to know each other. So spend some time on building community. And I give lots of suggestions in this chapter here. An engaging teacher introduction. I showed you a slide. Here I am. I'm from Ontario Tech, but I think it would be interesting if you knew that I was interested in rollerblading or inline skating, and I've gone skydiving, and I have a motorcycle, and those students are like, oh, there's a person here. That helps. A nice big picture graphic of the course. Here's where we're going. It's nice to know. Here's the plan. When you go on a trip, you'd like to know what's the itinerary, where are we going? So that helps. An agenda for each class. Students love that because they know, what are we going to do in this class? The online culture and rules, icebreakers, there's some links to there, and then your lesson plan. So students feel like they're in an environment where there's a plan, they get to know each other. Setting that first class first week and every, I'm sure Yvonne's well aware, you can spend a month sort of setting up with early years students and sort of, here's how we do things, and that's something that they're learning. And you don't just jump right into the learning, which we often do, we, including me being guilty of it in higher education. Online activities. Well, this is sort of the key, isn't it? In terms of what are we going to do online? Are we just going to lecture and then say, are there any questions, or do we do something a little more inventive? So here's a big chapter on how creating those synchronous activities, but there's actually a whole section of kinds of activities you can do in this book. So it's really kind of nice stuff. So you would have breakout rooms. I rely on them all the time. Collaborative learning, if you're doing it in the classroom, but it's small groups. You don't want anything more than 4 students because it's easy to hide, and you want everybody to participate. I always have them produce something. So I mean, they could have a conversation, of course, but that can go off track, of course. I mean, there's nothing terrible about that. It's just you do want them to focus on the learning. Sometimes it goes off track because they're getting to know each other. You want to have tight timing. You want to keep your timing focused. For example, I have a little timer right now and see where I am in the presentation, just to make sure that I'm keeping on track, because it's easy to get away. You start shifting around to those breakout rooms, you get in conversations, and all of a sudden 20 minutes is gone. You actually wanted it only to be a 15-minute activity. You give students reminders. Send those little breakout messages and say, okay, we have 5 minutes left, so they start to focus. So what can you do in a breakout room? Well, they could discuss a question, a reading, and create a summary of ideas. Always notice, creating a summary of ideas, they could do it in a Google slide and then present that back. Produce a visual summary. That's always fun. So a mind map, Google Jam, you can do something like that. As a team, they work together. How are we going to summarize this? Depending on your subject area, it might be a definition, a list of characteristics. Really good online learning. What are features of that? Then they brainstorm and do that in a Google Jam or a 1-slide presentation. The slide presentations are good, and you give students actually different sections to cover. And so you have this long presentation, which they can take home, and individuals, the group has worked on something that an individual slides, individual groups have worked on them, but then you have this big collection of ideas. That's very, very helpful. The key is only have students talk about their slide for a minute, because if they go on and on, then you'll lose the class. Have a debate in class. That can be, set up a debate. Create some sort of review an artifact or a tool, learning tool or blog post or a website. Have them review it. Give a critical analysis of it. Evaluate a video, generate questions. So you see this video. Yvonne presented a couple of videos. What question, ask key questions, and then they create a summary. Solve a problem in teams. So if it's more mathematics or science, you give them a problem. You say, okay, I need you to solve them. It's a significant problem, and let's see what you can come up with, or an open-ended case study. These are all breakout room activities. They can work extremely well in most subject areas. 2-vote polling is something you may or may not be aware of. It's something that was actually, I'm dating myself, but there used to be these tools called clickers. You may have used them. And we now have Kahoot and Mentimeter and so many polling tools. And so what you do is you have, you're understanding content. It could be a science question. So you present it and you have a multiple choice, and students vote on it. And there's always variation. You don't give them the answer right away. You say, okay, go back in your breakout rooms. This is really 5 minutes, and convince each other of your answers. And you randomly assign those, or even 2 minutes, and then you come back and they vote again. And more often than not, when they vote again, they come closer to the correct answer. But the most important thing is they're actually discussing, say, math or physics or science, and debating. You don't get that very often. So 2-vote polling works really nicely. And large class discussions are a big challenge for me. Especially when you can't see anybody and they've taken their cameras off. So what I like to do is prime the topic with an intro video or a poll or whatever, and then open up the chat and try to ask good question. That's the key, the good question, right? You can have a student monitor, as I mentioned, looking at the chat, because you might miss things, because if for large class, a lot of things go through. And then you look at the chat responses and you say, oh, Jeff, I noticed this, or sorry, I noticed that you said this. Can you please elaborate that? And the person turns on the mic and they chat. And then others see that you're a friendly professor, and that's okay. And they may start to encourage them to chat. So you're kind of nudging them out of that group chat. So that's something that's worked really, really well for me. But it does take some time. And I do try to nudge them to get their cameras on. One trick I do to get them to get those cameras on is just to say, look, if you want to be known by me, if you want to, because students will need references. If you want to, you want the class to go well, I need a facial reaction. I need a few people to come up, and if all fails, you bribe them. You say, everybody who puts their camera on, you're going to get an A, and they laugh. They know I'm not going to do that, but you try to create a friendly little atmosphere that they feel like, okay, I can do that. There are good reasons why people don't put on cameras, but it really does create much more connection.
Sorry to interrupt you, Dr. Robin. You have 5 minutes left.
Yeah, right on track. I'm good. So we have a couple of areas left: consolidation and home activities. One thing we forget to do, or we just run out of time. I've done this so many times when I was teaching high school. You're getting focused. You're in the moment. It's really, really tricky. You have to try to, even if you set up a little alarm, which you can with your phone, give yourself 5 to 10 minutes at the end of the class, even if you don't finish, because students need that control online. They don't want to just say, okay, everybody, goodbye, and bell rings and they run out. You want to come up with some ideas for your consolidation. So have it prepared. A key idea, a summary of the key concepts addressed, a link to your summary page, and what worked. I have my lesson plan, so the follow-up work that they have to do. That might be on the learning management system. I solicit, I think this is a great tool or suggestion, maybe one of my best, is to get feedback from students regularly, every 2 to 3 weeks. How's it going? What am I doing? That really helped improve my learning. It's anonymous, but you often don't know the student perspective. It's what Yvonne says. When do we consider these students? And we should, but we forget that, and it's important. Our students are the reason we're there. And then you check with the students. Do you have clear expectations? Are you sure you understand this? Okay, before you leave. So give yourself time to do that. And then home activities, I challenge you to have a variety of home activities. Yes, you can do a problem set or filling in a sheet or that kind of thing, but there's all kinds of tools here. You can use Flipgrid. They could create a video, Edpuzzle, where they could ask questions during the video. There's some beautiful TED Ed modules where they can ask questions and stuff. There's Perusal, where you can comment on videos, and it's sort of like a social media thing, but better than something like YouTube. They can create a blog post. They could collaboratively create something. So there's lots. I encourage you to use your imagination there. Final ideas. I think I'm down to the last here. Develop personal learning networks, or create them in the class, and students work with each other so they have 4 or 5 people that they can depend on. Now, what did the teacher say? What was this? If you create those networks early on, it can really help your class be successful. Have a growth mindset. That's best. You're going to make mistakes. I made many. So, but think about, okay, what can I do better next time? Show a lot of self-care, slow but sure. Go at a good pace for yourself. Don't try to do 20 tools. Gather feedback as you go, and stay calm. You saw a great example of that when things go awry and things that you're calm, because it sets the calm for the rest of the group. I think I will, those are some resources, and I'm done. And I'll put that presentation in the chat there.
Thank you so much, Dr. Robin. It was a pleasure to have you.
And thank you for inviting me. I appreciate it.
So anybody has any questions, please do ask in the chat room, or you can ask here.
I think you're an excellent teacher, Robin, that everybody is just happy
I
to.
am sorry, may I ask a question?
Please go ahead.
Of course, yeah.
My name is Beatriz, I am from Bolivia, and one
Hi.
of the most difficult things is to find a balance. How do you find a balance in using technology? How do you know if you are not using too much or too less, or maybe how do you know you're not taking enough advantage of what you have?
Yeah.
That has been a big challenge for me. Thank you.
It is a challenge, and I think my simple answer is, and I know it's not simple, is always use technology in a meaningful way, not just using it. You see, if you think there are better ways or as efficient ways to do something and help students learn something without technology, I would choose that, because using technology takes a lot of time. But there are some things that you can do with technology that you have to look at and say, is this really going to add to the learning process? And that's the question I always ask. And it's like, it's not really going to add. So something like Google Docs, if you're familiar with it, students sharing and creating something together, that adds something, because students at the time are actually seeing each other, and they can be working, particularly online. They can work together and create things together, a Google slide. And so it's like they're working at the same desk. I can't do that any other way online. It's very difficult to do that, or a Jamboard or something like that. But don't do it just for the sake of doing it. So for example, some of you may have used Kahoot, and that can work because it seems exciting in the class, but it can also be incredibly distracting. So you're going to evaluate too and say, did that actually work? And you can ask students, did that work? So it's a learning process. Don't use technology just for the sake of it, because it takes too much time, but focus on learning. So engagement, students need to engage with the material. How do they engage with the material? If they don't do that, if you just present like I did today, so maybe there were a lot of questions that followed up, then it's hard for students to really, anyone to absorb it. So that would be my answer.
Thank you.
You're welcome.